This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githu. It's Friday, January 17th. This is Africa 54. What are the top obstacles keeping the continent from achieving its full potential in 2020? We'll explain. Africa 54 takes a closer look at the strategies to empower women-owned businesses on the continent. The heart sounds of Kenyan artist Nyanshiski. We begin our broadcast in Southern Africa, where tens of thousands of angry Malawians participated in street protests over the alleged attempts to bribe judges overseeing a legal challenge to the re-election last year of President Peter Mutharika. Chief Justice Andrew Nyirenda charged that the 5 judges presiding over the case had been offered kickbacks. Opposition leaders say there was fraud in the May 21st poll, which saw Mutharika narrowly beat runner-up candidate Lazarus Chakwera.
I am going to march the entire route because I want justice to be seen. We cast our votes on the 21st of May, but it is evident that the votes were stolen, so we are fighting for justice.
The complaint, which was filed to the Anti-Corruption Bureau on Monday, prompted a call for demonstrations in Malawi's 3 main cities. 50,000 people gathered in the capital, Lilongwe, with smaller rallies in Blantyre and Mzuzu. Last August, the opposition petitioned Malawi's top court to annul the results. This is the first time presidential election results have been legally challenged since the country gained independence from Britain in 1964. Now, this year marks the beginning of a promising decade for Africa, according to African experts and global policymakers. Many of them gathered this week for the release of the Brookings Institution's annual publication on Africa. VOA's Mariama Diallo has a report on some of the key priorities amongst 6 of them.
Africa is home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. It's a reason why a report by the Brookings Institution says countries in Africa will continue to outperform growth in other parts of the world during the next decade. Brahima Koulibaly is director of the Africa Growth Initiative at Brookings.
Business environments are improving. Regional integration, underpinned by the Continental Free Trade Agreement, is progressing well. And the transformational technologies of the 4th Industrial Revolutions are spreading. So never before has the region been better primed for trade, investment, and mutually beneficial partnerships.
But obstacles also lie ahead. The report notes that climate change is one of the most significant risks to Africa's sustainable development objectives over the next decade.
Even though Africa contributes least to global warming, it bears the brunt of climate change. In particular, there's an existential threat for a lot of those areas in the low elevation coastal zones.
In some areas, rising sea levels, elevated sea surface temperatures, flooding and coastal erosion are affecting people's livelihood. Daniel Loha is an elder from the village of La Hukpanda in Ivory Coast.
Today we live in anguish. What will happen tomorrow if no one comes to the help of the village? We will disappear.
Matt Rees from the U.S. Agency for International Development says that governments and public and private sectors must work together to tackle challenges ahead.
The priority of not only African governments, but perhaps the donor community should be thinking collectively about how do we, in working with the private sector, position the private sector through policy, de-risking, enabling environment, and co-investment to sustain pinpointed assistance and partnership with African firms that they can employ the African population.
Panelist Viola Llewellyn is co-founder and president of Ovamba Solutions, which helps provide short-term loans to businesses in Africa via mobile phone technology.
For Ovamba, we really are looking at the next 10 years as the platform by which we become a policy solution to central banks. The role of central banks is occasionally underplayed. They're the ones that set market conditions for the capital markets and for small and medium enterprises, which is what our focus is.
Another challenge facing Africa in the next decade is energy-related, says panelist Armando Manuel from the World Bank.
Access of electricity in Africa is 45%. You can't develop in the darkness. You can't go to the moon when you have constraints to go to the next corner.
He says this is a fundamental problem the continent has to remedy. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
Millions of children in Sudan go to work each day instead of going to school, partly because of widespread poverty and in part because the education system does not have the resources to accommodate them. Naba Mohidin reports from Khartoum.
15-year-old Murtada Al-Haj left school 3 years ago to earn a living to support his family. Murtada lives with his parents in Khartoum and makes under $4 per day. The situation hampers his dream to become a doctor.
My mother kept telling me, in the future, and when our life gets better and not worse, I'll study and become a doctor. But all of a sudden, the whole political situation occurred in Sudan.
Sudan is ranked as one of the poorest countries in the world. Soaring prices sparked mass protests that led to the ouster of President Omar al-Bashir last year. The political situation has stabilized, but the economy is still struggling. In Khartoum, it's common to see children working as traders, carpenters, blacksmiths, and at other jobs. Most earn $1 to $1.50 per day. For Murtada and thousands of children his age or younger, they have to choose whether to study or to feed their families.
The children in the area can't afford continuing in school, as the economic condition is very difficult. The children's fathers bring them to us to find them daily work to help them, as life is really hard. It's rare that one of the children continues in this work, but Murtada did, as he lives around the area and his life is hard.
Sudanese officials have signed international agreements to provide free education and outlaw child labor, but have not followed through of any of the accords.
Poverty has a big impact in Sudan to the extent that it is not forbidding child labor, although the law is verified and frankly bans child labor up to the age of 18. The controlling poverty is a serious issue.
More than 3 million school-age children in Sudan are missing out on their education, according to a study carried out by the Ministry of Education and UNICEF. The education minister acknowledged that almost half of all children Murtada's age have no chance to attend school.
The country didn't uphold children's rights. It built a system to only ingest 60% of the children. 40% of this age class have no opportunity to get an education. And this is the main reason that 3 million children are missing out on an education, according to the UNICEF report.
With a new government in charge, Murtada hopes that the education system can change and he can pursue his dreams of getting a good education. Naba Muhiddin for VOA News, Khartoum.
Now, we often hear when you empower a woman, you empower the community. We Connect International is a non-governmental organization that empowers women-owned businesses around the world. Now, for more on what the organization is doing for African women, I'm joined today by Elizabeth Vasquez, President, CEO, and co-founder of We Connect International. Elizabeth, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther. I'm thrilled to be here on Africa 54.
Yes, so now I know you're all for change. Women change our world, right? So what criteria do you use to identify businesses in Africa that are owned and run by women in order to support them?
So we were created by many of the world's largest corporations. They are looking for women-owned businesses that are at least 51% owned, managed and controlled by one or more women. They want to know that if they spend money with a business, that women will benefit and control that money.
So let's talk about South Africa, where you have an office. What kind of support are you giving women there? What kind of business are you supporting in South Africa?
So in South Africa, it's very dynamic. All sectors of women-owned businesses and businesses of all sizes, not just startups, but there's some very large women-owned businesses that are providing our corporate members with security services, IT services, HR services, training, but also manufacturing. So it's really diverse, and our members are really excited about the potential to grow with these women-owned businesses.
And what about Nigeria? It's another large economy in Africa. What are you doing in Nigeria?
Same thing in Nigeria. We are certifying and educating the women-owned businesses, but also engaging corporations. Like in South Africa, we have Access Bank, but in Nigeria, working we're with Absa Bank and in Nigeria. So between the two banks and companies such as ExxonMobil, Walmart, and others, Ernst & Young, they're all connecting with these women-owned businesses. In Nigeria, it's just as diverse as South Africa. The women are in every sector, they're of every size, and they're really dynamic.
Now, I understand, that you actually want to open an office in Kenya. Why Kenya? What are you looking for?
So we've really been listening. The time we've spent, I just came back from a conference in Rwanda focused on women and businesses organized by the World Bank and the African Development Bank. And it became really obvious that the government of Kenya is deeply dedicated to leveraging its own purchasing power, what the government spends on products and services, and making sure women have access. And they want to engage the private sector for public-private partnerships to see what we can do to help as many women as possible reach their full potential and access new markets.
As you hear, we're Africa 54, so Africa is watching. And most of the women are wondering, how can we reach We Connect International? And what kind of support are you talking about? Is it a loan? Is it a grant? What is the support here?
It's interesting because most of the time when we talk about women business owners, they assume it's access to finance. And while access to finance is extremely important, and we work with a lot of banks and other partners that provide those services, women entrepreneurs want to sell their stuff. They want to sell their products and services. And so we are working with the market, with some of the largest buyers in the world, wanting to buy specifically from women-owned businesses. And to do that, we can self-register them for free. So they can go to weconnectinternational.org, self-register, it's free, it takes 10 minutes. And if they want to become certified, we can actually look at their documents to prove that this is a woman-owned business. And then we provide a lot of education and training, online, in-person, conferences, business networking, and meeting actual buyers.
Now, knowing what you know from Africa and the experience that you have in Nigeria and South Africa, and you're looking forward to going to East Africa as well, what kind of businesses should women pursue to succeed?
That's a really good question also, because you want to make sure that the women-owned businesses understand where the most profit potential is. We tend to go into low cost to entry but low profit potential markets. We really need to start thinking about where's the money. Let's follow the money. And these corporations are providing their experience and their markets to say, this is what we source, this is what we need from competitive businesses. They're not going to buy from the women just because they're women, but they're looking at growth-oriented businesses that can offer things in information communications technology, energy and alternative energy in particular, in the healthcare sector. Of course, business services are always going to be needed. So whether it's legal or HR or PR, marketing, they all buy all of those products and services.
Well, Elizabeth, the training is key for these African women. Most of them would be looking for training as well to enhance their skills, but it doesn't look like we have much more time. But thank you so much for coming on Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Sure. Elizabeth Vasquez is president, CEO, and co-founder of We Connect International. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, Kenyan music star Nyamari Ongegu. We'll be back.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. In Asokoro, a neighborhood in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, this unique structure stands out among other houses in the area. It's the creation of Saeed Jamal, a 62-year-old Nigerian citizen of Lebanese descent, who was born to a family that settled in Nigeria and operated a renowned automobile workshop. The structure features a swimming pool, a mosque, bedrooms at the plain wings, a guest house, and a garden. Jamal says the design was inspired by his wife's love for traveling and took over 3 years to design. The structure is open to visitors who want to take a tour of the property. Next up, a U.S. technology company is harnessing the power of the sun to produce renewable and potable drinking water, aiming to bring relief to millions of people living in water-scarce regions around the world. Zero Mass Water uses source hydro panels to produce water from sunlight, rather than the electricity that is produced from solar panels. The solar-powered hydro panels contain a hygroscopic material that absorbs water in the air. The air inside the panels is heated and circulated using solar power, increasing the relative humidity and forcing the hygroscopic material to respire the vapor, transforming it into liquid. According to the World Resources Institute, 25% of the world's people are close to facing dangerous water shortages, with 17 countries facing extremely high water stress. And finally, hemp is not the first product that comes to mind when it comes to building houses. But in the Australian state of Tasmania, hempcrete is increasingly popular. Made from hemp waste, lime, sand, and water, the product is still fairly niche, but builders say it's environmentally friendly and prevents mold forming too. Hempcrete has other advantages too. Because it's very dense, there's no need for heating in the house, and the product itself also has a small carbon footprint. And that's what's trending today.
Now, 2 out of 3 people in sub-Saharan Africa lack access to electricity. To help mitigate this continental challenge, the U.S. Agency for International Development launched Power Africa in 2013. Its objective was to bring together technical and legal experts, the private sector, and governments worldwide to work in partnership to increase the number of people with access to power. For more on the 6-year-old U.S. initiative, Africa 54 managing editor Vincent McCory sat down with Andrew Herscowitz, coordinator of the USAID's Power Africa program.
I think what people have seen is that what this program has done is it's produced results. To date, we've helped over 120 power generation projects reach financial close. That's going to make 10,000 megawatts of new electricity, which is not a lot for the United States, but that's a lot in many of the countries where we're working. Already over 4,000 megawatts are operational. And in fact, one of the issues that we're facing is that we've helped create interest and deal flow for many more big power generation projects, and we have to slow down a bit. Because just because you build a power plant doesn't mean that people have access to electricity.
Yes. Yeah, actually, that's a very key question there. How do you ensure that people get this electricity when we know there's some millions of people live in remote areas where even if there's so much power in the national grid, they just can't get it?
Yeah. Well, there are a few approaches. Power Africa has its Beyond the Grid initiative, which looks at different types of technology to help people get access to electricity when they're not connected to the grid. That can be solar home systems where they can power their televisions and charge their mobile phones and take advantage of highly efficient appliances, including electric razors, even irons that run from solar power. We even ran a refrigeration competition to help people figure out how to get the most efficient type of refrigerator that can run in an off-grid context. But then we're also focusing in the on-grid space. A lot of the distribution companies, the power distribution companies, they're not making money. They're either not making money because of lack of capacity, or people aren't paying for power. Sometimes it's the person, in a city who's just not paying for power, but sometimes it's even a big company that's not paying for power. So we have to help them improve collections. In Nigeria, for example, we brought teams in to 4 of the distribution companies and helped them generate about $150 million of new revenues just by helping them improve collections and increase their efficiencies. And that's real money that can be invested in putting wires from the power generation projects to industry and to people's homes.
Mm-hmm. How do you work on the ground? Because when people hear about Power Africa, they imagine they're going to be seeing the USAID coming, putting cables across the city, across the country. What exactly are you doing?
Yeah, so that's been the biggest challenge in getting people to understand how Power Africa works. This is a partnership. It's a public-private partnership with companies, with other governments, with the World Bank and the African Development Bank. And the idea is that the private sector is going to make these investments and that the public sector really just helps bridge those gaps to help them understand, help governments understand how to manage new technologies like wind and solar, because they're intermittent. The sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, and that has a big impact on the grid. It creates fluctuations. But the truth is those technologies, the prices are coming down more and more. We also are helping countries work with gas as well. There are tremendous gas resources all over many parts of the continent that can, that can power industry, that can power the entire continent. We've developed gas roadmaps for the continent and for Southern Africa to help governments understand how to take advantage of their gas resources as well. We take this all-of-the-above technology approach, but ultimately what we're doing is we're looking towards the private sector to make the investments. If you look at the 120-plus power projects that have reached financial close, those are worth over $20 billion. The U.S. government has contributed a very small amount of that $20 billion. And what we're trying to demonstrate is that limited U.S. taxpayer dollars can be used to have a massive impact. And it's been so successful that the Trump administration is now modeling Prosper Africa and even this new Development Finance Corporation after lessons learned from Power Africa.
That was Andrew Herscowitz, coordinator of the USAID's Power Africa program. It's time for our entertainment report, and joining me now is VOA Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell with hot sounds from a Kenyan star, right?
Yes, that's right, Esther. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Now, being addicted to something is usually not a good thing, but when it comes to loving you, Nyamari Ongegu, a.k.a. Nyashinsky, says it's awesome. The rap artist, he's high on love, and his new single, Lift Me Up, is a big hit in Kenya. Nyashinsky is also known as the comeback kid. About 12 years ago, he was riding high on the urban music charts in Kenya as a member of a group known as the Kleptomaniacs, but then he left for the U.S. When he returned to Kenya 10 years later, he made a big comeback with his single Malaika. And then, since then, well, Nyashinsky just keeps on popping out the hits. Lift Me Up is his latest. All right, and that was Nyashinsky's new single, Lift Me Up, from Kenya. Esther, back to you.
You make our Fridays so better. Huh?
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. Please join Heather Maxwell again next Friday for another exciting entertainment report right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.